Welcome back to another episode of the show. Before we jump in, I want to thank our sponsors, BioPro Plus by Bioprotein Tech. You can go to bioproteintech.com. Use the code FREEMIND to get $30 off a month's supply of this stuff. This is a non-synthetic growth hormone alternative. It's packed full of all kinds of beneficial things. I've been taking it for months now. Came off of TRT several months ago because we're trying to get pregnant, and I've been using BioPro Plus. I feel amazing. My energy levels, my libido, just all kinds of benefits. I had knee surgery. I've recovered like a champ from that, all while using BioPro Plus. It's a liquid you take under your tongue in the morning. Super simple, no needles, no nothing. I can't recommend this stuff enough. Bioproteintech.com. Use code FREEMIND to get $30 off your first month's supply. Also, justworkco.com. That is where we get all our shirts. Well, I'm not wearing one right now, but usually all the shirts I wear on the show, you can get there if you want to support the show, justworkco.com. Lastly, firstphorm.com/hurt. Firstphorm is the only brand of nutritional supplement I use and have used for the past 5 years. Can't recommend them enough. Firstphorm.com/hurt. You'll get free priority shipping. American company, supports the same things we support here on the show. Fantastic leadership, just amazing products, great quality. Firstform.com/hurt. Okay, my guest today is Kelly Walker. He was in the news a bunch for an issue a couple issues actually. He owned a coffee shop in Arizona that was the target of all kinds of far left hate because he was essentially supporting patriotic efforts and standing up against mandates and things like that at the height of the pandemic from his coffee shop. Also, he went to a school to support parents' rights to speak out against masking and the vax and all that stuff. And he got in some legal trouble for that. So very interesting guy, willing to stand up for what he believes in. We had a great chat. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Here's Kelly Walker.
Hey, Dave, this is Kelly Walker. I'm down here in southern Arizona, Vail, Arizona, which is near Tucson. And I work for the Epoch Times and NTD News. I'm a writer, and I just recently became a reporter for Arizona. So I've been writing for a long time. I've worked as a marketing director. I had a marketing agency back in Bend, Oregon, but we moved out here to Arizona in 2017. And in 2018, we started a little coffee shop called Viva Coffee House, and probably just right after being open for a year, the whole lockdown happened and COVID, and we actually moved here to Arizona to live a quiet life because we'd had some tussles with the left over there in Oregon, and our coffee shop was targeted by the county. We had passed our COVID inspection, the county resolution, but they wanted someone to pick on, so they chose our business. And I think it's probably because we held Back the Blue events and that kind of thing, but they falsely portrayed us as non-compliant, put us on what they call a wall of shame, a public wall of non-compliance, knowingly. And in fact, it was the president of the board of supervisors who did the report, which is incredibly corrupt. So we started getting doxxed and harassed and fake reviews and death threats and all kinds of things. So that was when things started for us. I was invited to the board of supervisors meeting for the public comment session by one of the two Republicans on the 5-seat board of supervisors. And I had 3 minutes to speak. I was arrested and handcuffed by 3 sheriff's officers within 30 seconds. I have a video of the whole thing. So, and I'm giving the short version, but I had this decision because suddenly I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to be on television, but suddenly it's all over the news. And I thought, well, I'm a target now. Do I walk into this, step into this, keep fighting, or do I just kind of try to hide it? It really was no decision to be made, Dave. I mean, of course you're going to stand up. And the day after that arrest, we had lines out the door to the coffee shop. I mean, people were coming even from other states. And it was just amazing
Wow.
because, at that time, everybody was afraid. Nobody quite knew what was going on. And they were just coming in saying, wow, somebody finally stood up, and they were telling us their stories, the agonies, their hopes, praying over me, all this stuff. It was pretty overwhelming. But it also started, it did two things. It made us a target for the left, for the corrupt county and city that we live in, but it also was like a magnet to draw in patriotic people who needed help, people who were being persecuted. So we had pretty large gatherings when all these different issues came out, when school kids were being forced masked, when mandates were being pushed on people. So,
Well,
gosh,
so
it's
much
been a
for living
crazy
a
two and a
quiet
half years.
life. Yeah,
Sorry,
no
say that again.
kidding. I just said so much for moving down there to live a quiet life, my friend.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous. We failed spectacularly at that, but and then a year later, after that first arrest, I was what you call paper arrested with a misdemeanor 3 trespassing, because a couple of his fathers went to a school at the request of another father who said that his son had been assaulted, not only forced to wear a mask, but take the soiled mask out of the garbage and put it back on after he had thrown it away.
Oh,
And the mainstream
man.
media went out and portrayed us, how they portray people, like
Hmm.
we're a bunch of terrorists, and we tried to, arrest and assault this helpless female principal. It was horrible. And I just endured 2 days of trial a year later, and none of the things that they said happened. That I had supposedly tried to arrest this principal, tried to put flex cuffs on her, all of these things that the media ran wild with, didn't happen. We have a video of every second of the situation. But what they did is they went fishing. They started with misdemeanor 3 trespassing, which is less. It's like a parking ticket. It's less
Yeah.
than loitering. And they started stacking charges on. And it was ridiculous, because I even have an email from the superintendent of schools the day after that incident saying the situation was resolved peacefully and the classes and educational environment weren't disrupted. And yet the judge found me guilty of 4 misdemeanors, one of them being disrupting an educational institution. I mean, it was a railroad job, it was political. So we're gonna appeal that, and we've got some other things up our sleeves. But ultimately, in that process, I got to meet people like Ian Smith over there in New Jersey, Lou Yurdell. We've had very similar
Yeah. Yeah.
fights. And I was talking to Lou Yurdell. Just went over to San Diego for the Freedom Revival, and he said, "Man, I just want to be left alone. I just want to run my gym." And it's the same way. You want to be left alone.
Yeah.
But I want to point out, you know, we're in this big fight. We're all tired. I know even Ian, the juggernaut that he is tired. And there are a couple of things. One is, I think when you're a man, especially like I'm 6'4", 230 pounds, I'm pretty large. When you're a man, you are immediately discriminated against, like because of your size, because of your gender, you're violent. But another thing I want to discuss is, I think a lot of us, we're dealing with the outcome of fighting, the pushback. I know a lot of people who are in court, facing fines, all kinds of things. And I think there's a certain frustration that some people have phoned it in. They're being apathetic. They're sitting back, and yet we're
Mm.
still fighting.
Mm.
So and I hope Ian doesn't mind me saying this, but like he said to me, it gets old being the hero. Like, yeah, you're fighting, but you want other people to start standing up and fighting.
Absolutely.
You,
Yeah.
follow my example and fight. So
I'm friends with Ian. I've had him on the show a few times. I'm social media friends with Lou. I haven't had him on the show, but we've had several conversations through social, and yeah, man, it is a shared sentiment. Andy Frisella, a friend of mine who has
yeah.
supplement company First Phorm, I've talked to him a couple times about it, and it is just exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting feeling like you're a lighthouse and knowing that there are many buildings surrounding you that won't turn their lights on. And I've voiced it publicly. I'm like,
Good
you
way to put
guys,
it.
you guys are spineless. You need to start standing up. I'm not going to keep being the only voice for you and your children, because you're sending me private messages saying, good job, go, go, go. But I can't say anything because I'm afraid to, you name it, lose my job, be castigated by my friends, be whatever, right? And it's like, man, you don't think I've been through the ringer, and you don't think all of these guys like yourself, like Ian, like Andy, like Lou, all these guys who have stood up, you don't think they've suffered losses and consequences? That comes with the territory. And you said it right when we started, man. There are a lot of mama bears who are standing up for their kids, and it's really shining a light on who is amongst the men who is willing to stand up for what they believe in, and who is truly what I would consider a high value, virtuous man. And I believe it's Warren Buffett who says, when the tide goes out, you can see who's been skinny dipping. And the tide went out on a lot of people, man. And a lot of people didn't have any clothes on. You know, they were empty. And I can relate. You know, I've got, and the reason I empathize with you and Ian and Lou especially is I owned a chain of restaurants that I sold right at the end of 2018, and I got so lucky. I mean, I would have absolutely filed bankruptcy had I still owned my restaurants when COVID hit. It's an inevitability. There is no way I could have survived. And, you know, we had several locations in multiple states, and just the difference that it would have been state to state, even it's really shown a lot of people just how important local politics are and how much they matter, I think. But man, I can empathize with you guys for sure, because I dodged that bullet just out of sheer serendipity.
Yeah, and we just had the reverse, because we just opened up right before, and it was a fight and struggle, and we were resourceful, and you know, people would donate to help us pass the toughest times. But you know, there are people where they'd come when they needed help. Hey, I'm a nurse. I'm going to lose my job if I don't take the shot. You stand up for them. You say, come to our shop and organize, and you go out and, you know, stand at the forefront. And then when you're having trouble, which, you know, I'm in a big fight now again, it's handfuls of people that show up. Like, where are the crowds? Where are they when you need them? You know, I'm really disappointed, because like after that first arrest, we had law enforcement from every agency you could imagine coming and saying, man, that was wrong. I had a sheriff's officer come in and say, I would have quit my job before I would have made that arrest. We've had this huge respect for law enforcement. In fact, when the defund the police thing was at a fever pitch and cops were being shot and persecuted, families of cops would come in and say, we're afraid Dad or my husband isn't going to come home at night. And we said, well, come here, we'll protect you if it gets really bad. So I still have a lot of really good friends in law enforcement, but I've seen some who are going to be order takers. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know the orders are unconstitutional, and yet they're going to do it. And I've challenged them to their faces. Look, you swore an oath to the Constitution. Stand up. Tell your chief or whomever, you know, whoever's pulling the strings, this isn't right. You know, because that's what we did for them. So I'm constantly issuing that challenge. But it has been really hard, Dave. I mean, the stress on my family, fortunately, my wife has been very, very supportive. But, you know, if you can imagine, there were times she didn't want to let the kids play out front because people were threatening to kill us. And just the persecution and having, you know, we had to stand down the county and call their bluff. And it's, I mean, I could just go on for hours as to what's happened. But we've also gotten these kind of people, and I've gotten to be friends with Sheriff Mark Lamb here. And his first book he wrote talks about the different kinds of people you're going to encounter when you're in the public eye. And I have to say, one of the hardest to deal with has been the people that come alongside and say, hey, I want to help you. I want to be a part of things. And they want to like bask in what they perceive as this glow. And then they turn on you. And I think a lot of their motivation is, hey, I want to be in front of the cameras. I want to be famous, you know. And I try to say, you don't want to be there, because that puts you right square in the crosshairs of the left, of dangerous people. Like, I have the FBI watching me. I know that. And it's almost like people get jealous, like, oh, who do you think you are? It's like, I'm just a guy fighting back, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that gets kind of old. Like people start to hate on you because they think you're doing this for yourself. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if you talk to those guys, Lou and Ian and several others, it do you really want to be sued for millions of dollars? Do you want to have people stalking you and giving fake reviews to your business? You know, um,
Yeah.
but I think right now I just want people to come together and realize, look, we have a common enemy. This country is going down a slope to communism. We're in the midst of an attempt at a color revolution, and we have people spatting with one another. Well, you know, we got to come together. Got to figure this out.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I was talking to Dan Holloway, who has Citizen Podcast. I did his show a few days ago, and the frustrating part is you we're sort of playing exactly into the way they want us to behave, feuding with one another left and right, and whether you consider yourself a moderate or a libertarian or independent or whatever, it's just the institutions, the federal government, in many ways the uniparty, which I mean, you well know there are quote Republicans who are just as bad as some of these institutional Democrats, and we're fighting each other while they're doing as they please and stripping away our rights and liberties, and
Yeah.
we're just falling for it. That's the frustrating part, is that you just want to, as easy as it is, and I've tried to adjust myself a little bit, because the left is an easy target, to call out some of the absurdities of some of the ideology they push. But at the end of the day, I have to ask myself, what good is that doing?
Yeah.
And then if it's in the context of the federal government trying to strong arm these ideologies on us, yes, absolutely, of course, call that out. But if you just want to pick a fight with a leftist, what good is it doing, right? So I think a lot of it is focusing more on solutions instead of just trying to win the internet back and forth battles,
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I tend to try not to take the approach of, liberal tears
Mm,
and I've actually seen some people really turn around. I mean, I have a good friend from Bend. He was a gay liberal atheist. And he's now, I think sometimes he's more conservative than me. He hated Trump, and then, COVID happened and all of these things. And it's not even about so much liking Trump. It's just realizing, hey, this man stood up for people, listen to them,
right.
and we're in a bad situation right now. So, and I had this couple, these two black women stopped by the shop, and they looked familiar. And I realized a little later we were following each other on Instagram, but lesbian couple from Seattle who had been pro BLM, beating the drums and everything. They wanted to stop by Viva Coffee House, our coffee shop, and we just had this common ground. And they woke up. They realized, hey, this is a hateful ideology. It's Marxist. It's communism. So, and by the way, I want to mention that the coffee shop's not open anymore. That's a different story. But it was, yeah, that was. I mean, Dave, I got to write a book about this stuff sometimes.
You should,
Sometimes,
yeah.
because you wouldn't believe some of it's just stranger than fiction, as they say.
Yeah. But you're still roasting coffee, right?
We are, yeah. So
Yeah.
I started Freedom Talk sometime after the arrest because we were putting a lot of social and political posts on the coffee shop page, and we continued doing some of that. But I started Freedom Talk to help restore American values, and I realized, beyond the fights and everything that's happening now and the issues, we're going to have to rebuild this country. We're going to have to re-educate people, reconnect them with their heritage. So we're doing a lot of those types of things. But yeah, we're roasting coffee now, where we have a mail order program that we've just really started. And my wife has the Revel Baker. You can find her on Instagram here, and she's amazing baker, and she's doing some things with that. And then I have the Freedom Talk show. And like I said, I've been working for the Epoch Times for about 6 months now, and that's going great. What an awesome organization. So, man, we've been through it. I mean, we struggled with the shop, just more than ran out of money, and had some difficult days when we were scraping by. But we're crawling our way out of this. I think the big challenge we have right now is we need to appeal this just ridiculous court decision. And so I'm trying to raise some funds for that. And I have to give a pitch for Give Send Go, and Heather Wilson over there, one of the founders. She interviewed me on their show they have on Gab. But don't use the leading competitor, you might say. Give Send Go they're actually Christian. They have ethics. Even if they disagree with you, they're not going to take you down. They're not into cancel culture.
Well, I think that's the key, because one beautiful thing about the American experiment is that we can all have differing beliefs, as long as we subscribe to our constitutional rights and freedoms, and we operate within that framework. The rest that's the beauty of this thing. And when you start to see companies like the competition of Give Send Go take people off the platform for ideological reasons, or you start to see, I mean, the really bombshell stuff that's happening right now with the federal government meeting with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, basically telling them what to censor.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's and they call us fascists.
Exactly. It's like, can you not see what is happening here? That's where you have to draw the line, because it's like, I'm all, whatever, believe what you want, honestly, as long as there are no externalities to your belief system that affect myself, my family, my community, my immediate people, then whatever, that's fine. As long as you believe in the Constitution and our rights as Americans, cool. But when you start to say that I can't exist or operate because of your ideology, that's where we have a problem. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences between the right and the left. And there is a lot of irony in what you said earlier with, they call us fascist, and it's like, I don't know if they've ever looked at the definition of fascism, but they're pretty well embodying it in a lot of ways, with controlling speech and showing up and trying to silence speakers and shut down businesses and all this stuff. It's like, and by the way, now they're taking orders from the federal government in that context to do so through big tech. I mean, it is wild stuff, man.
Yeah, it sure is. And my gosh, what times we live in, because we are like, the U.S. is the last bastion of freedom. And like some of my co-workers and some of the founders at the Epoch Times say, if America were to fall, there's nowhere else to go.
It's
and
true.
Yet we have this regime in place, so it ends up going into the hands of the people. And Carrie Lake was just she worked for a TV station. She was a public figure, but she wasn't a politician. She's a very personable, down-to-earth, friendly kind of person, but she stepped up. Eli Crane running for Congress, and then there are people like me, like you, we're not necessarily in politics, but we still play a role.
Mm-hmm.
And so this literally worldwide battle against tyranny that wants to take over the globe, we're the doorstop. Like, we're standing in the gap. We're in Thermopylae, man, and I think it's hard sometimes to be a man, because a lot of us, particularly if you're an actually masculine man or an alpha, you have this will to fight. You're a warrior, and you don't want to take that physical unless you absolutely have to. But even if you fight with words, even if you just stand your ground, I mean, you look like a big guy for sure. You're going to be instantly demonized for that. When I was in court, and literally I just sat the whole time, I sat in a chair. They made a big issue of my physical size. And my lawyer was trying to say, your size has nothing to do with it. Oh, yes, it does. Well, I didn't do anything. I sat there and talked. I mean, if I were a petite woman or something, it wouldn't even have been a question, you know.
Yeah, which is it's funny because they're essentially leveraging an immutable characteristic, your height, your size,
Mhm.
which is no different than skin color or anything else. Saying that makes a difference isn't. I mean, that's insanity, right? But to face reality, it's true. You know, so I am a large guy with tattoos and a beard, and you know, whatever. People have a certain presupposition about me, and I was actually telling Dan the other day on his show. My friend Maj Toure, he's with Black Guns Matter. He
Hmm.
uh, teaches the Second Amendment to like underserved communities and teaches proper gun handling. And really, really cool guy. He's been on my show. Um, he jokes around and tells me like, "Look, dude, you." Any leftist who sees you is going to automatically assume you're a white supremacist. Just look at you. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, well, fair enough. Maj is black, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So it's really funny coming from him. But, you know, I've had plenty of scenarios like that. It's like where I'll just go up to, and it's generally younger people, I don't know what generation it is, man. Is it Gen Z? The really sort of sensitive, softer kids, and I'll just say something simple to a kid working in a restaurant or something. And I mean, my wife and I have had a server request to switch and have someone else serve our table just because I guess she didn't like my tone and was intimidated by me. Like this is how bad it can be, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, man, I'm the nicest dude ever. Like I'm a big teddy bear, but
Yeah.
people do prejudge you like that. And you know, I think in no small way, it's certainly a result of this demonization of traditional masculinity under the guise of toxic masculinity, quote unquote.
Yeah.
You know, sort of all of the. It's funny. I did a video I think yesterday where I went on Healthline, which is supposed to be a decently reputable online source, right? And you look up toxic masculinity, and the list of traits was literally like stoicism, mental toughness, aggression, self-sufficiency. And I'm like reading this supposed toxic masculinity list,
Hmm.
and I'm like, every one of
Yeah.
these things is a fantastic trait to have. They're just trying to demonize the traditional masculine
Yeah.
values that you hold as a man.
I have a blog, and I should contribute it to it more on that topic, called tonic masculinity, like a tonic or a medicine. Like
Mm,
a truly masculine man is a tonic the world needs right now. I see what you're saying about some of those positive qualities, but I wrote an article, a piece, gosh, I forget which magazine it was in, the publication, but he basically set up a bunch of straw men, like, you know, put these, a lot of the things that he put down as traits of the toxic male, it's a parody. Like a
mm.
real man isn't like that. That's a man child or a boy child, you know,
Right,
like
right.
that's an insecure person. And I like to think, like, when I was a teenager, my dad gave me this book called The Man of Steel and Velvet. There's another book called Tender Warrior, and it's just the idea that you are, for the most part, that teddy bear, like you talk about. You're soft, you're gentle, you hold your kids, you hug your kids, you kiss them, you know. But if there's danger, you're going to be right up there protecting them. If the car gets stranded in the snow, you're going to pick up the whole family and walk them on frozen feet if you have to. And that's a beautiful thing, you know. But Dave, I really find this dilemma right now, because where is that line right now when you have people literally causing the death of other people, when there's so much tyranny, when people are getting in your life? At what point do you switch from that velvet to that steel?
Mm.
And the left is very good. You see this with the January 6th people. The left is very good at provoking, provoking, provoking. And the moment you react, they're going to demonize you and say, see, you're violent. You're violent.
Yeah.
That's a tough
That
question to me, because I don't think any of us wants to see civil war or violence in the streets. At what point do you resist? Like, at what point do you stand up? And I wrote an article called How to Murder Millions, and I talked about the Warsaw Ghetto. The the Jews were herded into this walled ghetto in Warsaw, Poland, under the pretext of, well, we're protecting you from typhus, right?
Mm.
And there were some freedom fighters that were collecting guns, and they saw the writing on the wall. They were going to resist, but they got a lot of pushback from most of the community because they said, "You're making it worse for us. You're gonna, you know." People have these delusions of things getting better, and I think in our situation it can, and we don't need to resort to that. But the whole idea was, and the same thing happened uh, during World War II when the Nazis were occupying France. This French resistance was like only 2% of the people, and 90% of the people looked at them as extremists. There's some amazing parallels here. And you look back and people say, oh, the French resistance was awesome. Everybody had a gun in their lunchbox, and Viva la France, they were standing up. No, it was a small group of people, and most people were saying, what are you doing? You're going to make this worse for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question in my mind is, how far do you go? How far do you push that line? Is there a point when you say enough's enough? And I think that's one of the big questions out there right now.
Yeah, I agree. That is one of the big questions. And I think it's something that we all grapple with. And, I certainly have my hard and fast lines, right? If you threaten physical harm to my family, forget about it. Lights out. You're done, right?
Mm-hmm.
The steel comes out very quickly, but it's, I think, a little more abstract than that, because you can slowly lose freedoms. Just there, I think it was funny enough, Joe Rogan, in a stand-up special that he did, where he talked about being surrounded by a household of women, his wife and his daughters, and he said his manhood was like a huge pile of marbles, and they just pluck one or two away every day. They just get him every day. They just pluck a little, and so you don't notice. Or the analogy of boiling a frog, right? If you put the frog in cool water and just slowly heat it up to boiling, he'll never notice the difference, and you can boil a frog alive. This is a real thing. That's where the concern lies for me, right? Because there are the major actions that I can absolutely say, yes, that is when I switch over to being the protector that I have to be. But how do you prevent it from getting to that point? And does that require physicality or something resembling that? That is what we grapple with, right? It's tough, man.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
For me, I set those lines early on. My first line was, the moment they said order or mandate, that was my line. No, I'm not. Look, I worked
absolutely.
I was editor in chief for a medical publication when all this started. I was writing peer review articles. I was getting data right out of China from one of the nation's top doctors. And I said, I'm not wearing the damn mask. I know they don't work. Before they started scrubbing it from the internet, I looked at all the research, and I said, I'm not going to do something stupid just because somebody wants me to. In fact, they cause more harm than good, especially here in Arizona, where they wanted kids to be wearing these outside in 100+ degree weather. But there are hard and fast lines. The first line is your freedom. You don't give up your freedom, not even a little bit.
Yeah.
And if people would have stood up hard, and I had this desperation, Dave, like to try to warn people, look, I know where this is going. Oh, but it's just this, it's just that. You're overplaying it, And here we are. And a big line for me is, you don't abuse children. You leave the kids out of it. I don't care if it's my kids or someone else's. I mean, the judge and the prosecution criticized me because, well, you don't even have kids at that school. So the hell what? It's my community. What if Oscar Schindler had said, well, I'm not a Jew, But now we've gone from, just wear this mask. It's going to be uncomfortable. Stay home from school, to giving kids substances they used to castrate cattle, mutilating our children by some of the same people who probably years ago would be part of like anti-circumcision protests or something. So it's those small degrees. And that's where, if you can stand up early and draw that hard line early, you just like, Barney Fife used to say on Andy Griffith, nip it in the bud,
Yeah,
but people have let it get so far, and now it's much harder to turn back.
it is. And so you mentioned writing for a scientific publication or medical publication. So my background, I did undergrad and grad school in the sciences. I was studying biochemistry, and then I was doing a PhD in comparative physiology using functional genomics to look at adaptive change in different systems. And I left early. I didn't finish my PhD for a number of reasons, but mainly because I hated the elitism of academia. I was actually at UC Berkeley, of all places,
Oh,
so
well,
like
yeah.
the bastion of liberalism in America. And I had a lot of contacts and former colleagues from that period of my life because I worked as a research scientist for a while in a lab. And it was so frustrating, man, through the 2020, 2021 period. All of these people, without fail, would say the same things to me. I agree with what you're saying. I appreciate that you're speaking out publicly. But, for me, I'm just going to wear the mask, even though I know it doesn't work. I'm just going to get the shot, even though I know it doesn't stop the spread or protect others or, all the stuff that we now know very well. And I was saying all this early. So I got thrust into sort of the public discourse because I put out a video in like March 2020, I think it was, Kelly. And I was just saying, I know a lot of you guys are scared and you're asking about masks and stuff. Well, here is the underlying science as to why they're not protective at the community level, especially cloth masks and surgical masks. And this was well-known science
Yes, it was.
in the circles that I ran in. And Fauci even said early on, no, that you don't have to worry about the masks. They don't do anything because they don't. They're not made to mitigate community spread, especially of respiratory viruses. This is like well-known, well-established science. And so when I put that out, I was putting that out because at the time I was only doing sort of fitness coaching related content. I had sold my company. I was sort of pursuing passion projects. And one of those was coaching people on their fitness and nutrition. And I was luckily here at the office gym where my studio is upstairs. We didn't shut down. We didn't require masks. We never did any of that stuff. Thankfully, I'm in South Carolina. It's a little different than a lot of states. Thank you, Governor McMaster. But I was putting out these videos where I was training in this public gym without a mask on. Nobody around me had a mask on. And this was the height of the hysteria. March, April, May 2020, right? And people kept DMing me saying, why are you doing this? Why aren't you wearing a mask? And instead of replying to all these people, I was just like, I'll make a video. I'll talk about peer-reviewed science. I'll put it out there. This will be very helpful to people. Man, how naive I was. I put it out there and the blowback was swift and very, I lost friends, family members, clients. You blocked me and called me names and all this stuff. And so then I put out a post holding up a sign that said, we can disagree and still be friends.
Yeah.
And it was sort of just directed at those people who had written me off as this sort of evil person who, now, of course, these days, a lot of these people have reached out to me and apologized and you were right all along. It's like, yeah, I know, dummy. I was doing a PhD in this stuff. But that went viral. That we can disagree and still be friends was shared millions of times on Facebook and it exploded. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, other people feel this way. Right. And so that's when I started doing all of this and getting involved in the conversation. And it was shocking to me how much hate I got for that unifying message of we can disagree and still be friends, almost exclusively from the left. And I mean, it was, I still go back and scroll through the comments sometimes just to get a good laugh because I'm talking the most hateful stuff, man. Like, look at that stupid white supremacist. He probably hates, people of color and thinks that he's superior. All these things they say. Yeah. By the way, I'm married to a person of color. and have been with her for 16 years, and I have a mixed race child. So it's just preposterous, man. It's
Well,
people.
you're racist for saying that. That's the most incredible thing. Like you say, I have
Right,
black
right,
friends, but I'm
right.
married to someone from another race. Well, that's what a racist would say. Just, you know, we need to just start giving it back to these people and tell them to shut up.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I do.
nobody's
I
afraid
do.
of them anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Because levering that accusation, and I think it's easy for them because it's lost its value to them. But to me, actually being a racist is one of the most horrible things you can be.
yeah,
So if you're going to call me that, it's on. You better expect repercussions because, in my opinion, there aren't many worse things you can call me. So, along the lines of what you said, man, this is the craziest I heard. So, someone said, well, multiple people actually said, you're only in your relationship with your wife so that you can oppress her and exercise your white supremacy over her.
oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
I'm like,
Yeah,
dude,
because
if
that's the goal of
you,
your life. Yeah.
right. If you spent one night in my household, you would see that, no, Dave, go take out the trash. Dave, go do this. It is far from being
Yeah.
the oppressor.
The irony is that they're being oppressive by doing this. They're a bunch of little
100%.
bullies, you know, but I I've gotten thousands of threats and
I believe it,
comments,
man.
and not one of them has had the courage to say it to my face.
Of course not. Could you imagine? Could you
No, no,
imagine?
no.
They would never. And so that's
Well,
why I get a
no.
laugh out of it these days. But man, it was pretty hurtful in the beginning, especially like friends from decades back, that are just like, I had no idea you were a bigot. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm saying, let's be friends.
Yeah, because like, where do they think they have the right to tell you how to live your life or to say these things about you? People who don't even know you? But I honestly, I think what it is so many of these people have given up a belief in a higher power, a belief in God, and
Mm,
they've made a new religion out of wokeism and virtue signaling. And there's no greater virtue signal than a mask because it's right there on your face. And if you're not part of the religion, you're a heretic. And it really
mhm.
is a kind of it's like a humanist religion, but it's so inconsistent. And I really hope, I mean, I'm seeing signs, and probably you are too, that people are getting fed up with this woke
Yes,
culture. It's like the new
absolutely.
Puritanism, they're going to tell you what you can and can't do, what you can and can't say. And I think people are getting real tired of it.
Well, we are seeing classical liberals getting fed up and speaking out public, like Bill Maher, for example. I
Yeah,
mean, he is coming after the wokesters hard now. I mean, really hard.
I
He
love to
just,
see that. Yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic, man, because he wasn't always that way. And look, it's gotten to the point where it's undeniable. And you've also seen a lot of the left eating their own, right? So eventually you can't be woke enough, and next thing you know, the goalpost has shifted, Overton's window has shifted, and now you're like, whoa, wait,
Yeah.
that's how I have to be? No,
Yeah.
I thought I was a lefty, and they're like, no, you're a bigot now, and so people just end up coming over to. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard left the Democrat Party, right? And
Yeah.
now she's campaigning for Carrie Lake, which is
Yeah. It's
fantastic
awesome.
to see, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that, man, being down there. And I know Carrie. I've
Yeah.
followed her campaign closely because I'm a huge fan of hers and what she's doing. And man, her opponent, what's her name, Hobbs,
Yeah.
she
She's a train wreck.
Katie Hobbs, she. Did you see Don Lemon coming after her about not
Yes.
debating?
Oh my gosh.
I
Yeah.
was like, do my
Well,
eyes deceive me here?
yeah, she's really bad. I mean, she has no place getting near the governor's office. I mean, it's like she goes back to her safe space, which I guess at times is a restroom.
Well,
But
that's what Biden did during the election. He stayed in the basement, so they're just using
yeah,
his playbook.
yeah, they're following the leader, right?
Hmm.
Well, yeah, it has been very interesting, and I founded two branding and marketing companies, small companies. So I was used to meeting different people. I represented Robert Oberst for a little while, strongman.
Oh, dude, I love that guy.
Oh,
I love his stuff.
he's
What is
awesome.
his thing? Strong and
Yeah,
pretty, or
strong and
something
pretty.
like that. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm very comfortable with people, but when all of this happened, I just realized, you know what, we're going to have to come together as a nation. So I'm going to have to get to know a lot of people and make those links and those bonds. And that's been really, really nice. And I actually approached Ian before I knew him and just said, hey, you're getting a lot of trolling and stuff like that. Why don't I help you, engage some of them, get a little team together to report the comments and stuff like that. So that started a friendship. But I got to know Carrie really when she was starting out her campaign. And I wasn't sure at first
Mm.
what I thought of her. But I've gotten the opportunity to get to know her family a little bit, her staff. And man, she's the real deal. She is so sincere. And I want to tell you a little story. Because of this whole school event that I told you about, I had to endure a year of some people, most everybody who knows me knew it was a crock, but I had to endure this gossip mill of like I would actually zip tie and try to hog tie and arrest a principal. Like, come on. But Carrie and I had talked, and she was going to come to our coffee house and do a little event. And so I was, she handed it off to some of her people, and one of her people texted me and said, "Well, we're unfortunately we're going to have to cancel the event due to last minute circumstances." And I had this sinking feeling like, oh man, it's because of this controversy and stuff. So I texted Carrie and I said, a lot of people are going to be disappointed. She's like, what? I said, well, the event got canceled. She's like, what? All exclamation points. I didn't know anything about this. And she said, I'm going to tell my team I'm going to be there come hell or high water if I have to cancel every other thing that day. And,
Wow, that's great.
she really won me over. And she came and spoke. And then we were talking afterwards. And she said, Kelly, someone on my staff canceled that without my knowledge. They said, you're too controversial. That person's no longer with us. And I just thought,
Mm.
this is a person who's not going to do what's politically expedient. She's going to do what's right. And she also had the wisdom to see through. I'm sure she understands the media and she saw the lies that were out there. And she stood by me. And it turned out positive for her campaign because I've had so many people say when she came to your coffee shop, that's when I realized I want to vote for this lady. But, in theory, it could have been negative because, I'm the bully of female principals or whatever. But
Yeah, those articles are preposterous, man. I've obviously done my research and everything leading up to this episode, and it's wild. It really is wild, the stuff that people will write with reckless abandon about someone.
they just literally make stuff up.
They do.
And look, nobody planned this, but when you hear from a dad who's got panic in his voice, please come here, keep me calm. Dude, they assaulted my child, they abused my child. He called the cops. He was the first one to call the cops. I called a state senator and a sheriff's lieutenant who came into the coffee shop. And I was the one who ended up, saying, well, they say you should leave now. And I think that's probably a good idea. But what they didn't like was that I chewed out the principal. I gave her a piece of my mind. And so, the zip tie, they attempted arrest, none of that happened. They even had to admit that I didn't even take a menacing step toward anyone, didn't raise my voice, but you interrupted her and you're a large male. And it's almost like, do you want to just say I was mansplaining? You know? And so this judge wants to give me jail time basically for advocating for someone for checking up on a child. They never denied that the trash can incident had happened. They mentioned it in passing. Well, it was a brand new liner. I don't care. And how do you know someone hadn't just spit in there? But but they're gonna demonize you because they don't want you to stand up to them. They don't want it revealed that they've accepted millions of dollars to enforce these CDC guidelines. They don't want people to know that they ignored many complaints from the community saying, look, you're harming our children, you're killing our children. And in court they said, well, we have processes. You didn't need to go to the school. Well, it went viral that a Vail school district meeting, over 200 parents showed up. You might remember this, Dave. And, they swore in some attendees there because apparently the board fled. They shut down that meeting. And it was parents, it was kids, it was people from the community. And they didn't get mad until they shut the door in their face. And so to sit there in court and say, well, you can go through a process, they closed the process down on us. And not only closed the process down, they demonized us. because they knew they were doing wrong. They knew they were hurting kids. They knew they were getting money for it. So what do? They demonize the parents. Well, it's your fault. You're too hostile. So we're fighting these things, and ultimately we're going to win.
Yeah, I think you
And
will. You will.
yeah, yeah. So we're going to appeal that decision. And I have to say, I'm really glad that Carrie and Blake, and I had Abe Hamady on my show recently. They all know what's going on. They know what's been done to our children. They know that, look, in Arizona, we have in our Arizona revised statutes, we have a parental bill of rights. And there are no exceptions. It says that you make the healthcare decisions for your child. So if you say, my child is not going to wear a mask, distance him, whatever you want to do, well, send him home. No, I'm not going to send him home because that's bad for his health. He needs social interaction. He doesn't need to be singled out. And there's a pecking order at schools. I don't want him picked on.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
just ran roughshod over that as if it didn't even exist.
I like Blake as well. I've been paying attention to his campaign. You have some good, solid people running out there, I think.
I like Blake too, and he was
Yeah.
always very interested in our coffee shop. And there was a time when, after all we'd weathered, after all we'd been through, the inflation and the gas prices made it look like we're going to have to close. And then a restaurant owner who's a friend came and said, "No, I don't want you guys to close. I'm going to come in. I'll bring in staff, money, whatever you need." Blake was just so happy. I saw him at a rally, and he's just like, "Oh, I heard the good news. I'm so glad you're not closing." Why we closed, I put out a video on that. That's another story. That's where the weirdness comes in. But I like him, and I've found these people to be personable. And I've met politicians before. Some of them were nice, but many of them were just so fake.
Yeah.
And it really
Most of
hurt
them are
me when
narcissistic.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say most are narcissistic,
Yeah.
self-absorbed, so.
So there was a time when even people supposedly on our side were saying, fake lake and all this stuff. And I kind of took personal offense to that because, at first, because she has these kind of glamour shots, right? At first, it kind of was unappealing to me. And I thought, oh, just another politician. But when I got to know her, she was just very down to earth. And then I realized this is what you do in the news industry. You have to have the perfect look. She's doing what she knows. And so when people started saying, and I'm not talking about the left, I'm talking about people who were for other candidates in the primary, they're calling her all these names. I took it as like they're saying something about a friend because she became a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would be the first to say
very genuine.
If she was those things, I wouldn't stand behind her, but I do.
She is, look, in a way, I don't blame Katie Hobbs for avoiding debating Carrie because Carrie would chew her up and spit her out.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's undeniable. I mean, Carrie is so well spoken and so sharp on the issues.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
quick on her feet. Katie is the exact opposite. She is literally the exact opposite. And I'm not so sure, man, because I've really been watching. I've been watching a few elections, yours being one of them. I don't really buy this dead heat thing. These polls are. There's no way. There's no way, right? Yeah, it's
yeah.
wild.
I think everybody's concerned about cheating and what are they going to do? But the crowds for Kerry are immense, and you see pictures of Katie Hobbs' so-called rallies, and it's like it looks like a church potluck or something.
Right. Well, we saw this in the presidential election of 2020 as well. Yeah. And we were all saying there's no way Trump loses this thing because look at his crowds even compared to 2016, right?
Oh, yeah. So, did you see some of the rallies in Arizona? I mean, it was miles and miles of cars.
It was wild.
Yeah. So and a lot of those Trump rallies started or ended at our coffee shop. So we were right there. We saw it. I mean, the enthusiasm. And, I guess somebody could question, was there enough cheating to take the election? I have my own opinions on that. I think there was. But for people to say, oh, it was the cleanest election ever, there was no cheating, you're a conspiracy theorist. Look, there are enough incidents that are just ironclad to where you can say, well, there was cheating.
Not even that, Kelly, but just to say you can't question it. I mean, that is antithetical to the American way, right? We question things. We want to know. We want to audit every aspect of our lives. That's part of who we are, right? We
Yeah.
want to know the truth.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to me. I put out a tweet today, I think. I've been watching this Twitter thing unfold, and as most of us have, right? And people are actually upset that the White House is getting fact checked on Twitter.
That's so funny.
It's like, so they're actually, their preference is to be lied to by the federal government. That's how insane it has become, my friend.
Well, yeah. And, I had a friend of 35 years. We were freshmen in college together when we were 18. And we lost that friendship when all this started happening. And he married someone who was into Black Lives Matter. He was Black. And he said, Kelly, why don't you just do what the CDC tells you? Why don't you just trust the World Health Organization? It's because I'm a scientist. I also have a Master of Science degree. And you don't trust the science, you trust the scientific method, right?
That is absolutely
because
correct.
The scientific method is always falsifying, always challenging assumptions. And what they did was they said, this is the science and you're going to live with it. That is not scientific. That's not following the science. That's following orders. That's following dogma. That's just not how it's supposed to work.
I'll tell you something funny and ironic along those lines. So before I went to my undergrad program, I was a science nerd in high school. I mean,
oh, were you?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, dude. I went to this, I'm from North Carolina originally. I live in South Carolina now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Better taxes, Republican governor, better schools, etc. I went to this summer program called the North Carolina Governor's School for Natural Science, where all the nerd kids went in the summer. And we had this T-shirt made to commemorate our class. Every year, the new class made a T-shirt. And our T-shirt said, accept nothing, question everything, right? Because this is a hallmark of a good scientist. Now, fast forward 2 decades. I, as part of my Just Work clothing line, I make a T-shirt that says question everything. A girl who I attended, the Governor's School for Natural Sciences, who wore that T-shirt proudly at that time 2 decades ago, sent me a nasty message about how questioning everything is conspiratorial and all this stuff. And I'm like, you have lost the way so profoundly, right? We used to take pride in the fact that as scientists, we question everything. And now you have Fauci saying, I am the science. It's wild.
What an arrogant little man. What an arrogant little man.
Well, I'll tell you what, and this could be a good guest for your show. I just had Katie Arrington on my podcast. She was the DOD Chief Information Officer under Trump, and she ran for Congress in South Carolina, the 1st District down here. And so I had her on my show yesterday, I think. And she was she was in the Situation Room with Trump and everyone sort of during Operation Warp Speed. She handled a lot of the logistics and sourcing and all of that and the cybersecurity surrounding that. And she said, man, and I'm going to put a clip out with her saying this, so it's not a big deal for me to say it now. She said it on the show, but she was like, at that time, that early, when Dr. Birx was still involved, everybody wanted to get rid of Fauci. Everybody. Everyone.
Wow.
And it was a strategic decision that was made not to do so because they didn't want all of the media focus and everyone focused on that instead of the execution of Operation Warp Speed. So it was an executive decision made, but that early on, my friend, 2020, everybody wanted to get rid of him, and it was discussed heavily.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
I'm like, well, if you just would have done that, if you just would have done that, So yeah, gosh. But she would be a great guest for you to have on your show.
I would love that. Yeah, let's definitely see if we can swap guests and share the love. I would love to talk to her. Yeah, for certain. I wanted to say too. I'm going to be great. I'm going to be really grateful to have you on Freedom Talk, and feel free
tomorrow.
to, yeah, tomorrow, yeah. Feel free to have your links for your clothing line and everything else. If you don't mind, I'd like to mention that we are needing to raise money for this appeal,
Yes.
and it's something that uh, Kerry's team has said it's important we win this, and it's a symbolic win for Arizona. So
Yeah. Tell
um,
people where to go.
it's I can tell some people where to go. Yeah,
Well, if
give
they
them
want to
Fauci.
support you, if they want to
Yeah,
support you,
yeah,
where should?
exactly. It's givesendgo.com slash
Mhm.
freedom talk.
Okay.
And then you can find my show and this funding page and pretty much everything else at linktapgo.com slash Kelly, Kelly.
Okay.
So, if you even want to throw in a few bucks at givesendgo.com slash freedom talk, um, I'm fighting for everybody. I'm fighting for you. And I don't care if you're in Arizona or not. Like, we've got to push back. We've got to stand our ground. These people are afraid of us. They don't know what to do with us. And they orchestrated this whole trial. It's public record. It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But, they don't know what to do with you when you just keep going because they think, oh, we're going to do this to him and that'll shut him up. Well, what they don't understand about some of us is the harder you hit us, the stronger we're going to get when we get back up off the canvas and we're going to hit back.
Especially when you're a principled human.
Yes.
If you have principles that you hold fast to, it doesn't matter how hard they hit. You operate from a place of principle, and so you're not going to stop.
Yeah.
And what I would say to my listeners, to those of you who have messaged me and are afraid to speak up yourselves, but you support what we're doing, this is a perfect opportunity for you to actually make a difference. Go and support Kelly and his cause and help him get through this. Do your part. If you don't want to speak out publicly like we do, you can throw some dollars at his cause and support what he's doing, and that will make a difference. So I'll link to everything in the show
Thank
notes as
you. I
well.
really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, brother. I want to wrap with one thing,
Sure.
and I've actually, man, I'm crazy. I booked myself for 3 shows tonight, so I actually have another show later
Oh
this
my gosh.
evening. Yeah, I'm insane.
This is my second one, so
Yeah, you know it then. So I like to ask first time guests this question when I remember it, and because for me, Kelly, I'm really, really concerned with young men, but young people in general. So the question I always ask new guests is, if you could give young people, say 18 to 25, a piece of advice, what would one piece of advice you would give them today be?
oh my gosh. I actually wrote a book full of
Oh,
advice.
perfect. I teed that up.
I'll send you a copy. Yeah. I just published this on Amazon, but you can get it on linktapgo.com slash Kelly. I originally wrote this for my sons. I'm a father of 5. I have 2 that are out of the house and then 3 younger ones at second tour of duty, but
Wow.
one piece of advice for young men, there there are so many, and I'm not like one of these evangelizing people, and for me, God is a very real experience. When I went from getting a bachelor's degree in English and theology at a small Bible school to going to New Mexico State University and going into the sciences, I had this real crisis where some of the things I had learned growing up, particularly with Genesis and evolution, didn't square. And I was
Mm.
willing. You follow the evidence where it leads. I was willing, as much as it hurt me, to choose atheism if the facts just didn't line up. So I read scores of books, and after a long period of time, I got, I'd say, a deeper faith. But I think the biggest piece of advice is just seek God, seek your creator. I came to the conclusion that atheism is absolutely absurd. It doesn't have the answers. And I took a very objective look at it. I threw away everything I thought I knew and started fresh, you know, and pursue that, because that's the essence of what you are and your greatest potential in this world. And I think that's part of the problem today. We see these young people who are adrift, who are pouring bottles of milk on the floor and gluing their hands to the floor, and having tantrums, and just they have no grounding in their life. You have to live for something larger. You have to live for something bigger than yourself.
Yes.
And that actually kind of emptying yourself and taking on the characteristics and following the example of the divine and those rules for living, I think, as Jordan Peterson calls them, it will actually make you more of yourself. It'll help you reach your potential. So just seek God. I'm not going to give you any preconceived notions about it. Just ask and seek and find your way. But
start yourself on that path. Yeah, absolutely, brother. That's fantastic advice. And I was one of those kids for a long time. I grew up with absentee parents. I was a scientist, so I know everything, right? Like religion was this silly thing we did before we had science, was kind of my take. And then, man, I was just, as Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I got punched in the mouth with life. And I started as a man. I didn't start attending church until I was a grown man with a wife and a child. And I finally decided to do that and seek God after several decades of life. And I'm so glad I did, man. So that is fantastic advice. And I thank you for that, Kelly. Everybody go support this man, support his cause. I'm looking forward to doing your show tomorrow, brother. And to my listeners, until next time, my friends, keep your minds free.